be talking about why film life is so hard, and it probably is an indication of my current job and like the realizations that I've been having. And maybe this might be a therapy session for myself to say things out loud. I don't know. But I think a lot of people who get into this industry just have no idea what they're getting themselves into. They just don't know. They really think they're going to be entering into a lovely industry and they get to tell their stories and work with actors and like create the craft. And like, yes, that does happen on a really good day. It really does happen. But the grind of it all, people just don't realize the grind that has to happen. And I'm not even talking about the hard work that it takes to even get in when you first start. We're not even talking about like trying to get jobs and making sure you stay and making sure you break in and you have networking and all that stuff. We're not even talking about trying to get jobs. We're talking about actually when you're on set and you're actually in the job, what's happening there? What's actually happening on set? Every project that you're going to work on is going to have its problems. It's going to have the pros and cons. There are going to be good things and bad things about it. But there are shows where you are really going to enjoy them. All the stars are going to align. And then there are shows where you're like, oh my God, how did I get myself into this mess? What am I doing? What's happening? I listen to a lot of motivational like videos and stuff. I need to like get myself in the right mindset. And there's one sentence I always hear all the time. It's like, you can't say you had a bad day. Don't say you had a bad day. Just say you had a character building day, because those bad days, those challenging days are really the things that are gonna make you better, gonna make you stronger. You're like, okay, what can I do to, remedy the situation next time? So it's like all about like learning, you know what I mean? The first thing we're gonna talk about is the hours. The hours in the weekly schedule. This is probably the toughest thing, and I think with my current situation in the last 10 days of working, the last block was very, very challenging. And the reason why I think it was so challenging, and I think the basis of why the show that I'm on now is challenging, is because of the hours in the weekly schedule. Because here's the thing, is that some people are really thinking that they're going to get on set, it's going to be a nice Monday to Friday, it's going to be like they know long hours. Long hours is one thing, but I'm talking like when you start, when you end, and then the next day when you start and end. So the show that the last block, the show that I'm on, we started last week at a 6:30, and I'm pretty sure maybe you saw my Instagram post. Maybe you didn't, but either way, I couldn't believe that on a Monday I was doing a 6:30. And let me tell you that a 6:30 on a Monday, 6:30 p.m., let me just make that clear, a 6:30 p.m. call on a Monday is rough because you know that you're going to be doing overnights the entire week. Well, we weren't doing overnights the entire week. We got halfway through the week, and then we had to have tight turnaround where it was like everyone just took their union rule amount of turnaround, which is like the hours of rest between the time you leave set to the time you come back, right? So tight turnaround where it's like, okay, we wrapped at 3, therefore we're going to take a 3 p.m. call. It was just like shifting back into the daily schedule of trying to get back into days is so hard because your body had just now adjusted to working overnights, right? You worked overnights and then now you're asking your body to adjust back into days. So your sleep schedule is like wildly out of whack. It's wildly out of whack. And you're like, how do I get through this? It is so hard because your sleep schedule, like you adapt pretty quickly into nights for some reason. Like it was weird because a lot of people on set were like, yeah, my eating habits are really weird. I'm eating at weird times. Like when we start at 6:30 on a Monday, and then we had a 6:30 Tuesday and Wednesday, and then we had a 4 p.m. on Thursday, and then we had a 1 on Friday. So we were like going up and down. It was like bananas. So what normally happens, and this is because of we had exterior night shots. We had the show that I'm on it's like a night show. Okay, the action happens at night, guys. So we have to shoot overnights. That's expected. I understand what I signed up for. I totally understand what I signed up for, guys. But the usual way of going about a weekly schedule, and as a first AD, when I schedule a shoot, what you want to do is you try to ease the schedule into overnights, right? You start Monday like 7 a.m., 8 a.m., and then you work your way into an overnight. You gradually go into that, right? So your body can slowly adjust to doing an overnight. Because if you are going from like, okay, you have a 7 a.m., then you have a 10, then you have another 7 a.m., you're going back and forth, your body cannot respond as quickly as you want it to. So the hours in the weekly schedule is very, very hard for your body to adjust because people were cranky, people could not get to sleep. And when you don't have sleep, everyone's just a little bit more on edge, okay? So this is one of the hardest things for people to adjust to, honestly. And I will say we will talk about the length of hours, right? So let's talk about the hours itself. Now, when I do my set pay training class, I tell them straight away, like, the expectation is that you are going to be on set for 13 plus hours. The shooting day is 12 hours. But then think about pre-calls, people who are in before the crew call, the amount of locations people who are there before the crew even shows up. And then like the Teamsters are there before the crew shows up. So there's a lot of people who are there before your crew call. So when crew call starts, that's when shooting actually starts. Like you're actually kind of like putting the cameras down, framing it up, actors are acting, rehearsing, we're doing all the stuff, right? So shooting hours, but then all the people who are there, like PAs, like making sure background gets ready, the base camp folks making wardrobe, getting the actors ready. So all that stuff happens even before we start shooting. So that's why I say 13 plus hours. So that in itself, the amount of hours you're going to be doing is a lot for people to stomach. It really is like, wow, like we do sometimes 2 corporate work days in one of our days. Like I'm at a 40-hour work week by like Wednesday. Okay. So a lot of people are not ready for that adjustment because they're like, wait, I didn't want a 9 to 5, but I didn't want a 9 to like a midnight, 9 a.m. to midnight type schedule. So a lot of people like the amount of hours and then the time that people are starting and then the time that you're ending, and then you have Fridays. Obviously, if you don't know what a Friday is, it's like we start on a Friday, but then it goes into a Saturday. So, and then you're like probably wrapping at like 4, 5, 6, 7 in the morning on Saturday. That's why they call it a Friday, because it's not really just a Friday. It's a Friday and a Saturday. So it's a Friday. So that is probably the toughest thing, just because your body is like, oh my goodness. And then add on top of that, the amount of people who just don't, I think, take care of their body to try and give them the best possible option or chance for your body to adjust to those types of hours, like making sure you hydrate enough, making sure you're not eating junk food, and make sure you're eating healthy, make sure you stretch every day and exercise. Like I cannot preach this stuff enough, man. And people are like, oh, I have to get up like every morning. I try to just make sure I do a 12 to 15 minute workout. That's like nothing. 12 to 15 minutes, but when you are so tired and you're like, oh my God, I just got to sleep. I'm like, because we haven't even talked about the commute, right? Because you don't shoot in the same place every day. So when you're not shooting in the same place every day, you could have a half-hour commute. You could have an hour commute. The other day we were in like right near Jamaica, Queens, and that was like an hour and a half away from me. And it depends. Is it rush hour? Is it not rush hour? Is your commute gonna be like when you are working in New York City, if you're taking the train, it could save you like maybe 10, 15 minutes, but rush hour commute on the subway, if you're going from the Bronx to Brooklyn, that's an hour and 15 minutes on the train, okay? So, like, the commute itself is also wild. So, the amount of hours you're shooting, then the amount of hours you're taking the time to actually get to set is also a factor of, like, the amount of time. So, a friend of mine is like, dating, and she was saying how her date was kind of like, so when are you home? And this is why people are like, they don't want to get into a relationship with someone who works in film because they're never home because of the hours. Okay. And that is a very, very real, it's very real. And the divorce rate is quite high in the film industry, and people have kids, and they, I know a number of people who have gotten remarried, and it's like, I myself am separated. So I will say it's probably a factor because like I was on away jobs in different states, and it's just when you're away for so long for a lot of amount of hours, you never see your significant other, it is hard. It puts a strain on the relationship. So it takes a lot of work to make the whole life work, okay? Why is film life so hard? And I think it has everything to do with the power structure, the authority that people have. And now let's talk about Quiet on Set for a second. Max show, new documentary, it's 4 episodes. Everyone has been talking about Quiet on Set and like the dark side of kids TV, and they're talking about Dan Snyder and like what happened to Drake and all these things that happen. Like, I'm watching this documentary and I'm reflecting on my career and like the things I'm handling now or handled on a previous show, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, this shit has not changed. Like, the whole sexual abuse and harassment and all that stuff, hopefully it has, because I have worked with a lot of minors, and there's not a moment where I'm like, you know, there have been times where I've worked with kid actors and minors and kids who are like 8, 9, you know, sometimes they're 15, 16 or whatever. And I'm always like, okay, come on, mom. Like, I'm like, come with your kid. So, and I know it's, if you are putting your kid through the acting world and you have them on TV and film sets, it's like, it's going to be taxing on your kid, but it's going to be taxing on you as a parent too, because you need to be there all the time watching that kid no matter what. And it can get kind of maybe a little boring, maybe a little tiring. Maybe you're like, oh God, we've been on the stage for this many hours or whatever. Like, and minors can't work past 8 hours. So, but then it really, really gets me when what happens is that like, hey, we're running over, you know, let's just ask the mom if she can stay a little longer. And this is like in the last couple of years that I've seen this happen, where a producer will walk up to the mom and be like, is it okay we keep them another half hour? And that's that I'm talking about this power structure, because as a mom, what they were saying on Quiet on Set is like, you just don't want to squash the opportunities that your kid wants to have as an actor. Because I'm sure a lot of these kid actors have been thinking about being actors for like years. They see people on the screen, they're like, I want to be a performer. And as a mom or a dad, you're like, oh yeah, I guess, sure. Like, if it's only 15 more minutes, but then it ends up not being 15 more minutes, it ends up being 45, ends up being like, you know, 9 hours, you know, total, another hour on top of that 8. And this happens all the time, where you just have someone pressuring you to be like, we need your kid for this much longer because we're running behind. And as a parent, it's like, you don't want to be the one to say no, because you just don't want to like ruin your kid's career, right? And that is very, very still prevalent. It still fucking happens. I've seen it happen. And as an AD, I refuse to ask the parent. I'm like, that's not coming from me. That better come from a production person, or you know. And I always, and maybe I think producers that might catch my live stream or videos, they'll be like, oh, I'm glad that she checks that, you know, like that she is like looking out for the parent. Because I tell the parent, I'm like, you can say no. You can say no right now. You can go home right now. You have every right to say no. And if you get reprimanded for it, there is something that you can say, like, I decided to go home after an 8-hour day. They wanted me to stay. I didn't want to stay. Therefore, and then they wrote me off the show. You know what I mean? Like, you have to just make sure that you're like keeping track of this stuff. And I always tell the parents and the kids, like, if you want to go after your 8 hours, you have every right to go, because like child labor laws. You know what I mean? So getting more and more into the power structure and talking about the higher up you go, right? So say you're a director, say you're a showrunner, say you're a producer, and you start to get a lot of power. And like, if you start to be on a show where it's a hit and it's making money and the ratings are really, really good, the producers and the writers and the directors, and especially like directors who are successful and they win awards, and the more and more of those people you have, the more entitlement comes with that, and the more power hungry comes with that, the more they want things done their way, and there's no other way to do it. And I think that I have encountered this a lot, where like, oh, you're only this, therefore you have no say, where you will get corrected for your behavior, but they will not. So, for example, if you spoke to someone, maybe frustrations were high, maybe we were moving fast, and just because like you didn't have your pleasant face on and you were just like, hey, I need you to stand here and then you're gonna go across there or whatever it is, like when you're talking to an actor or a background actor, or maybe it's the DP, maybe you just were in a hurry and they found you to be dismissive because things were running fast, right? And then you're getting talked to because of your behavior, but then the only reason why you're being talked to is because you don't have that power, right? But the showrunner can say and do whatever he wants. The director, who's super famous and has loads and loads of awards, can say and do what he wants. The cast member that's number one that brings in millions and millions of dollars, they can say and do what they want. So that's the thing that really, really gets me is a lot of shows, networks, companies that are running these new shows are like, you can call HR, you can feel like you are safe enough to say something. If something's wrong, you can go to your superior and we can do something about it. But it's not really like that. In reality, what happens is that you can make a complaint. You can go to HR and say, hey, this happened to me. But then they do an investigation about it, right? Then they do an investigation and the person knows probably why the investigation is happening. And then they start calling everyone on set that has either worked around you or you have said that they have seen the instance that you are calling HR about, right? So then the investigation, but everyone knows now that there's an investigation, that you had said something about this person or whatever. So now it's like everyone's looking at you like, what did you do? Why did you do that? This person is X, Y, Z. And then a perfect example of something that had happened to me, or like maybe that I'm struggling with currently, is because and this quiet on set portion where they were talking about how they brought on two women writers and they split the salary of one writer between the two women that were on that show, right? And I kind of felt that in some type of way because I was like, this makes sense. So they had talked to their union. They were WGA. They had talked to their union and they were like, is this right? Like, can they do that? And then the union was like, definitely not. They have to pay you separate salaries. And because Dan Schneider, this is all like he said, she said, but I'm pretty much going to believe the ladies that were telling the story that like, oh, we didn't do that. And then the Dan Schneider, the person who's like producing or running the show, goes back and was like, you went to your union and you basically like, told on us, right? So if the union goes to your production about some of your pay or whatever, then they know that you are talking to the union, right? And I've been through this where I've had to talk to my union rep, and then the DGA has to talk to the production about something, about money that they owe me. Well, it's kind of weird that in the DGA, you have directors, you have ADs, you have location managers, and you also have the unit production manager. And for me, this is a very, very interesting thing, and it's happened for years. It's happened, I think, since the beginning. I don't know exactly, like the DJ has been in existence since 1936, right? I don't know when UPMs got in the mix, but UPMs are ADs, the production manager, they're the bosses of assistant directors, right? So you have to go to the UPM if you have any type of rate problems, like, hey, I'm owed this money, or I did a double day, or I'm about to reach a double day. And first of all, if I'm about to reach a double day, I don't give a fuck. Why do I have to give you a heads up that I'm about to reach a double day because you're going to cut me? And then I don't get the double day, even though like I still have to do the work. Like that's a whole side tangent. But either way, the person that's also in your union is going to be a person you have to fight against to get your re-rate and get your money, which all in itself is like, I think is a conflict of interest, right? So the power structure in film, it makes it harder to kind of fight for, one, to make sure there's fairness. But if someone has enough power, and power in the sense of, do they have enough fame? Are they making the show or movie a lot of money? Then it's like no one can say anything to them. For example, there's a specific director on a show that is long running where he likes the set cold on the stage. So like people have to wear layers on the stage, right? And just because he is a name, he can get away with that. And it doesn't matter if everyone else is fucking freezing as long as he gets what he wants. And that's the thing that I'm talking about is like, it's not about everybody. It's about, okay, well, I'm super famous. I'm the one directing. I'm the one producing. I'm the one, making sure this thing goes. Therefore, I get whatever I want. And this is something I'm going to really, I think, forever struggle with. as far as like me working in film is because people who if you're a PA, if you're a crew member, if you're an AD, or I would say not the first AD, if you're like a lower AD, then you get talked to about your performance, how you talk to people. And it doesn't happen on every show where like, oh, well, the director said some things that are inappropriate. He was yelling at people or he made someone feel uncomfortable. It takes a very, very brave person to be like, that made me feel very uncomfortable. Now I'm going to HR and we're going to go forward. But then you risk being fired. That's very much a very real thing that's happening now, is that you risk being fired because of you stood up for yourself. And right now we just came off a strike. So you're like, I don't want to lose my job. And like for me, re-rates are a thing because the first AD will leave me on set for a number of hours to run the set. And it's like a gray area because if I take on the responsibilities, well, then I am owed a re-rate to first AD. And that's like double my salary basically. So, and now it's like, if I ask for the re-rate, well then I fear that they won't ever give me a bump up day to first, or they won't give me a bump up day to key second. So all these things where you're like afraid to say something and be like, well, yeah, you owe me this day. Well, then they just won't bring me on and they can fire me for, whatever for the next episode or something, which is completely unfair. And it's very hard for me to stomach all of that when it comes to like the power structure. And just to get back, we'll circle back to Christopher Nolan. Like homeboy brings in billions for studios. And I love Christopher Nolan. I love his movies. Have I worked with him? No. I hear he's a great person to work for. But the fact that he's like no chairs is interesting, right? It's like if you have chairs, you're sitting, you're not working. I get it. I understand the mentality because I talk to my set PA trainees a lot about this, where it's like, no one's telling you can't sit down. Just don't sit down on set. Just don't sit down when you are in front of your bosses. Like do it on your own time. Hide if you need to sit down. Take a minute, whatever. Do it when you're not in front of everybody, right? And people hate that I have that stance because you're like, we should have a right to sit down. But when you're sitting down, if you're sitting down on a lockup, you're not really going to be doing that lockup very efficiently because you look like you're relaxing and you're not really working, right? So if you're standing up and you're like confident, you're like, yes, I'm going to do this lockup, that's one thing. But if you're sitting down, you are resting, you are not working. So I understand the mentality with the whole Christopher Nolan and not wanting to sit down, right? I've worked on some shows where the cast member would be like flipping out if their chair wasn't like right there next to him. Like, and they were saying that there are no chairs for even actors on set. So it takes a huge name like Christopher Nolan that makes billions of dollars for studios, and he brings in $1 million for himself like every fucking month probably. He brings in millions for so many production companies and like billions for studios, and people will fight for Christopher Nolan and will put up with any restriction or demand that he has to make sure he's happy and to make sure he sticks with a certain company to make sure he's bringing in the big bucks for that studio. So the power structure for me is like very, very hard for me to be like, ugh. You just have to kind of stomach it. You have to just deal with it. And you just hope that as long as you keep treating everyone with respect and with, you're civil with everybody and you have a good attitude, it's like you hope that you're not a victim of this power structure and you just like, I'm just here to work. I'm just here to do my job. I'm here to set some background, tell people what's going on as an AD, let the actors know what they're doing. Just want to have a good day. Okay, I just want to have a good day and hopefully not be a victim of someone's crazy high demands because they're in a position of power. And this is a very real, very, very real thing that happens to people, even still today. Not even just kid shows, guys. I'm talking about like fucking fully adult shows. Movies, television, streaming service, all the things. It is still very much a thing. Unpredictable income. Now, this is very, very hard for a lot of people to expect because when I was coming up and I was a day player, and Amanda can speak to this because right now she's day playing as an additional, but also she has like a part-time job or a full-time job, right? So this has been my scenario when I was an additional day player PA, when I was maybe getting like 2-3 days a week, but then on the weekends and on the other days, I was a barista. I was doing like 40 hours a week as a barista, and I was doing like maybe 1 or 2 days on a film set or what TV show or whatever the case, right? So the unpredictable income is like you could work 5 days. I could work 5 days a week on 5 different shows. The next week it could be 1 day. It's just as you're needed that is very unpredictable income. It's like, for me, it was like a bonus anytime I got on set, you know? And on top of that, unpredictability as far as the year goes, because are you staffed on a show that's 4 months long? Well, after 4 months, what's your next job? What's your next gig? You're looking for the next thing. So you have to make sure that, you know how people say have savings for like 3 months? Well, when you work in film, you need like savings for a year. Because now with the strike, now, like, I will say, like, SAG and okay, so the actors, SAG union, right? SAG actors, like SAG-AFTRA, the actors union, and then you have WGA, Writers Guild of America. They are on the same timeline. So every time their contract comes up every 3 years, they're always going to negotiate together along with the DGA. The DGA, SAG, and the WGA all have the same timeline. So the year after that is the Teamsters and the IATSE, right? So that's a different timeline. So that fluctuating time is like, you're like, oh man, this could be a year. I think next year, I think we're in the clear. There's no one negotiating contracts, but like every other, like every 2 years, you're like, oh, like, yeah, every 2 years. I think it's because it's like, if there's like a year between, there's like you're going to have a year off of like, you're in the clear. So you're like, okay, good. So when that happens, the unpredictability of like, we could be striking, we could not be striking, oh no. Like even about the pandemic, but luckily the pandemic is a whole other issue, right? That's a whole other thing that kind of like came out of left field. Everyone was like, oh God. And then we were out of work for 7 months or 6 to 7 months. Some people were on set in August. I was on set in October. So I was out of work for 7 months versus some people that were like 5 months. So God bless them. But the unpredictable income is hard for people because people just like, they want security. They want financial security. And it's very, very hard for people to be like, how do I buy a house? How do I have a car payment? Not knowing when my next check is going to come and how much that next check is going to be. So that's why people fight for those staff jobs. And it's very hard to figure that out. And that's why I tell everyone that's coming up and they're starting as a PA and they haven't gotten those staff jobs yet and they're additional day player and they're coming on when they're needed, you need to have a side job. You need to have a side job. There's no way around it unless you get financial support from family members, from a spouse, or maybe you just have a trust somewhere. I have no idea. But you need to make sure that you have a flexible job or some type of income to supplement the fact that you are going to be out of work maybe for a month, or you're going to get 1 day here, 1 day there, or a couple days per month, building up to the bigger paying jobs or the staff jobs as you build your career. So the unpredictable income is very, very hard for a lot of people. It's very, very hard, and people are like not expecting that. And not to mention, people who are trying to make their own films, forget it. Like that's a whole other financial risk that people like lose their houses over. They like sink like thousands and thousands of dollars. They get their friends and their family to invest in this movie, and I'm talking like hundreds of thousands of dollars. People like are really good at fundraising because they have like rich friends and rich family members and stuff. But people who are in the indie filmmakers, they're like beg, borrow, and stealing, trying to make their feature work or get it made, and so they could get distribution and get a deal or whatever. Like look at Paranormal Activity. They made that movie for $50,000. I believe they fundraised all that money, and then it ended up being like multi-million-dollar franchise. So it can happen. Success can happen. It's just very unpredictable. And if there's anything I know about human beings, is that the uncertainty of it all is hard for people. They don't like the uncertainty, the unknown. It's like they want to know when their next paycheck is coming. They want to know how much work they're going to get. And that's why people worry about the next job and the next job. And they don't want to say no to any job that comes their way because they just don't want to be in the spot where they can't pay their rent. And no one wants to be homeless. Of course, I get it. So unpredictable income is very, very hard. So when the living is good and you're on a good job and you have tons and tons of money coming in, do not live like you are a king, guys. You have to live beneath your means. I'm not here to give you financial advice, but when you have a good job Pay off your debt. Get out of debt, right? Make sure you don't have those monthly bills. Don't let the credit people and the interest rates eat your income alive, okay? Like, make sure you're putting your money away for that hard few months that's coming down the line. You want to make sure your expenses are covered. And your expenses shouldn't be credit card debt. Your expenses should not be a fucking crazy big car. Like, you got to live beneath your means. You have to make sure that you can thrive. And I'm not saying just survive. Have build a life that you like, but build it in a way that's not going to fucking cost you so much money. So just make sure when the given is good and you are on a good job, save your money. Save your money for when those 3 months come along and you're not working in the wintertime. Like, January and February are really, really hard for people on the Northeast, right in the Northeast, because it's like wintertime and not a lot of things are shooting besides network shows. Okay, so, or, around Christmas time, we go on hiatus, so it's like there's usually like between May and June, not a lot of shows are ending. And there's like a big gap there between after July, after the Independence Day, 4th of July, like that's when shows start picking up. So May and June are hard for people. So make sure you have enough money to get through those months. Okay, because you don't want to find yourself in a spot where like, oh God, I have to be a barista. I have to grind it out 20, more hours a week. I have to do 60-hour work weeks as a barista. And those companies sometimes don't want to give you overtime. Okay. So just keep that all in mind. Rejection and criticism is hard. No one likes to be rejected. No one likes being told no. No one likes being told like, hey, you did it wrong, or everyone wants to be accepted and loved. So I know that rejection is very, very hard for a lot of people when it comes to this industry. And this is what makes film so hard. Why? Because it's very competitive. Why is it super competitive? Because 50,000 graduates per year come out of film school every year. And that's 50,000 more people trying to get into an industry that isn't that big. Right? There's only so many shows that are shooting. Like, there are hundreds of shows, but there's only so many slots. Okay? And thankfully for a lot of people who are like departmental, they want to be in a certain department. They don't want to be directors and cinematographers and producers, thankfully. So there's more jobs for people but 50,000 graduates from film school, right? We're not talking about the other people who didn't go to film school, who are just coming out of college. Maybe they have an English degree or a communications degree or like regular four-year school. Or even people straight coming out of high school. Like, they don't want to go to college. They want to go straight to set, which you can do. That is a possibility. No one's saying you need a college degree to get to work in film, because you don't. But rejection is all a part of that. It's very, very competitive. People who want to be in film because of this glamorous life. I don't know. It's not glamorous, guys, please. There's a lot of rejection. People who are actors they go to auditions. They get rejected all the time. It is part of this life, being rejected. And I think when you apply to jobs, you apply to those jobs on film websites, or you're in that Facebook group and you send your resume, or you don't get a reply back. That's a form of rejection. There's a lot of rejection that you need to face. So I think that once you get used to rejection, once you're like, oh man, that really stung, you get past that, I don't like being told no. Get used to being told no. Get used to being told no and just keep trying. Because what combats rejection the best is persistence. Because all you need is that one yes. All you need is that one yes. You are going to get no after no after no. But then someone gives you a chance. Someone says yes to you. And then that is the door that opens for you. And that is what gets the ball rolling. Okay? That, there may be, perfect example is me being like really socially awkward and not making friends with a lot of people and kind of being rejected by a lot of people that, and probably me rejecting them, not talking to them, but me not connecting with someone. That for me is a form of rejection where I can't connect, or I can't get into the group or whatever. That's a form of rejection. But all it took was like one person to connect with. And then I was on the next show. And then I connected with one other person. And then I was on the next show. So you always just need that one yes that can make all the difference. I'm starting to lose my voice, guys. Thank God. So criticism is the other part of this. No one likes to know that they did something wrong, because everyone wants to be there are people who are perfectionists and They want to be perfect. But if you do something a certain way and someone pulls you aside and says, hey, for the next time, can you just do it like this? Like a perfect example is like when I'm setting background. I'm setting background and like the director doesn't like it. I'm like, oh, fuck. It like stings a little bit, but I know that it's like, I'm not in his brain. I'm not in her brain. This is her vision, not my vision. So knowing that, it's like, I know that the whole criticism of it all is hard for a lot of people, especially if like you're a writer and people are like, this scene doesn't really make sense. Well, what is it that doesn't make sense? Like, how do I fix this, right? Or if you're a director, like you're not getting the performance out of the actors the way you want. And someone says like, I think you're doing this, you're not saying the right word, or, or even if you're a camera operator and you're not doing the move, or you're a focus puller and you focus on the wrong person in the background and you're supposed to be in the foreground. Like there's so many things that you're going to get so much feedback, or, you're going to get corrected and you're going to get criticized for all the things you do. You can't make everybody happy, but you know what? It's like you can adjust. And I think if you just take all of this rejection and criticism with a grain of salt and just, reflect on you, take accountability for one, because it's like, that is one thing. Take accountability, right? Because I feel like when you get criticized, a lot of people, when I do approach them with like, hey, can you do it this way? Or, how, I always want to know why someone does the thing they do or why they do it that certain way. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I understand why they did it the way they did it. But then I tell them why I want it done the way I would like it done, right? If I'm talking in a AD to PA situation and they're like, oh, okay. Sometimes you're not going to get that. They're going to be like, do it this way and that's it. And you're not going to get the courtesy of someone explaining why to you. So rejection is very hard. It's very, very challenging to get rejected all the time. And it's very hard to be criticized and given feedback. And all you can do is just be like, I'm learning. You have to remember that when you are entering film and you're a set PA, that's an entry-level position. There's no way that you can know everything and do everything perfect. Because why? You've never been on a show before, or you've never really been on a bigger project. You've maybe never done an action thing, an action show before. And you're going to be learning all the time, even when you get in higher positions, right? So maybe you're bumping up to a second, and maybe this is your first key second job. Maybe this is your first director job. Maybe you were a writer's assistant, now you're a writer, right? So it's like, there's always that you're going to level up. And when you level up to that position for the first time, you're going to be learning a lot of stuff. You're going to get a lot of feedback. You're going to get corrected a lot as you keep leveling up. And even me now in the DGA, going from PA to AD and base camp AD to, second and second to key second, like, and then, or even when I'm a first AD on an indie thing, like I'm learning so many things all the time. You can't do things perfect. You're going to make mistakes no matter what you do. You can strive for perfection. And also, don't forget about all the curveballs that happen to you in film. All the things that are just like, oh, well, lost location. Oh, that actor got sick. Oh, well, the director is upset. Like, there's going to be something that happens, or, so-and-so stuck in traffic. We're not going to get that person for another hour. What do we do? Like, there's going to be all these things that get thrown at you and you just have to adjust. And during that process, you're going to make mistakes. And just know that if you know you're going to make mistakes, it's like accept it, learn from it, and then move on, progress, just keep going. And I think that's what happens when people get criticized, they get corrected, because the moment you get corrected, you know you did something wrong, to put it simply, or you didn't do something a certain way. That means you made a mistake, right? So, and then they just like spiral out of control. They do this downward spiral, and they're just totally going into the negative rabbit hole, and they're beating themselves up, and they're just being so hard on themselves because they made that one little mistake. It's like, bro, it's okay. Like, we've learned from it. We've moved on. Because remember, we move quickly in film. Like, we've forgotten about the mistake you just made. As long as you have learned from that thing, like, we're going to move on we have to progress in our day, guys. We have to keep moving on. So don't obsess over the small things that you may have done, all the mistakes that you've done. It's going to happen. You're going to make mistakes. And how you handle those mistakes and how you respond to the criticism says more about who you are than you kind of just making the mistake, right? How you are after the critique or the feedback happens. That's what's really what like shows who you are as a person. So another thing I have to address is creative challenges, because film is wildly creative. Obviously, it is like the most collaborative, creative medium that there is, because there's so many disciplines all put into one project, right? And if you're a director, or if you're a production designer, or if you're a costume designer, if you're the director of photography, if you are the writer, if you're the producer, you are dealing with the creative choices of filmmaking. And if you don't know how to collaborate, that's going to be very, very tough for you. Because while a director is the vision and they are the leadership of a film or a TV show, there are going to be multiple other people that are going to have a say in the outcome, in the result, in the footage, or in the final product, right? And even as an actor, you have creative choices as an actor. So a director may want it this way, but you're like, you know what? It doesn't make sense if my character does this. And some directors lose their mind. They lose their mind when an actor says, I don't think my character would do that. But it's like, you have to trust your actor and you have to hear them out. You know, give them that chance to be like, yes, do one for you and then do one for me. Do one take like the way you feel it out and do one take the way I want it, and we'll see what works. You know? So, and also with like what the director sees versus what the director or photographer sees versus what the camera operator sees. What a camera operator can come up with may not be what the DP wanted. And then what they come up with might be like, no, that the director says, no, that's not what I was thinking. So there's a lot of things that everyone sees it a certain way, but it all has to come together collaboratively. Like there's got to be like a synergy. There's got to be like a syncing up of the minds creatively. And sometimes it can cause a lot of friction. If the director of photography and the director and, you know, maybe the actor or whoever else is dealing with a certain problem, they're not gelling, those are some time delays, I will say. If they can't come together, it makes for a lot of friction. It makes for, I will say, a lot of confrontation. So that's why people choose to work with the people that they know they get along with and they know they like. For example, you know, Hans Zimmer always works with the same directors because they see things. You know, I think when Christopher Nolan, when he does his soundtrack, it's like when he's working with his composer, or his sound composer and like his artists, they are like, he describes it and then they produce it and they're like, yes, this is exactly what I was thinking, you know. And then sometimes it happens and it's magical, sometimes it doesn't, and it's like, oh man, it takes a lot of revisions. So there are people who want to be, I even forgot about the editors too, because they also have a story to tell. They also have an artistic vision about how the edit's going to play out together, right? How they cut things together is all a creative choice, right? So when you have the director and an editor together and they're not saying things the same way, it can really be like really, really tough in that process. So the creative challenges can be very, very tough. And I know when it comes to someone who is a director, who's also being the editor, who's also shooting, which, you know, director, editor, and the director of photography, like 3 of those creative positions all in one brain, you do have more creative control. And that's why people do that. That's why they're like, I want to be the producer, the writer, and the director, because then they have more creative control and less people being like, we should do it this way. And also, don't forget, the studio has a say. The people who are paying you the money to make this thing, they have a say. And if they don't like how an episode is working, or if they don't like how a scene is working or how it worked out, then they're going to be calling the director up being like, you know, they're going to call a producer and the producer talks to the director most likely. But then sometimes the studio does talk directly to the director. So everyone has a say because there's money in the game. There's so much money there to be spent. And if it's getting wasted, phone calls are being made, guys. People are being like, fix this. I mean, also, it's the studio's calling, like, the first ADs and the producers be like, why are we shooting so long? And you're like, well, the director can't make up his mind. So that's another thing. If a director isn't shooting fast enough, then that is also a call that is made from the studio. So creative challenges are very, very big for a lot of people. And it's also why you've seen a giant rise in actors who are directors and actors who are producers, because they don't want to just wait around for a role to be casted. They want to create their own roles. They want to direct their own roles. So I get it. Creative challenges are very tough for people to stomach. And that's why they're like, if I just get high enough and then I'm all three of these positions, I don't have anyone tell me I can't do things a certain way. So that's one thing. So creative challenges is very real, folks. And if you can't collaborate, or you're collaborating with the wrong people who don't see things the way you see things creatively, then that's when you know you're like, all right, I'm not going to work with that person again. I'm going to work with this person again. And that's why people hold on very tightly to the people they get along with, and they creatively get along with. And this has to do with networking. And this is why I'm writing a book about networking, guys. I am writing a book about film networking, probably be out next year. It takes a long time to write. It's very difficult, actually. I'm going through the process of writing a book, and it's very, very hard. But networking is something that makes film life so hard, because people are not expecting to do it as much as they have to do it to survive in their career. And for my introverted folks out there, I get it. I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to reach out to anybody. I don't want to bother anybody. I just want to work. I just want to work hard. I want to be on set. I want to work hard. And I just want to be hired for the next thing. And I want to keep working. But in film, what makes it challenging to work in film is that you have to keep connecting with people. You have to keep building those relationships. You have to keep making sure that you connect with people on a human level. Networking is seen as such a negative thing. Networking, for the most part, especially when you're in LA, on the West Coast, I feel like it's even worse for what people see networking for, because they think that you have to be someone you're not, that you have to be fake, that you have to use people, that you have to step on people, you have to like compete with other people and make sure you're, beating out the competition. And if you're networking the right way, it's really not about that. It's really not about stomping out your competition. Okay? And here's the thing with networking is that people think that you have to be friends with everybody. You don't have to be friends with everybody. You have to respect everybody. You have to be civil with everybody. You have to get along enough to do the job on set or in post or in pre-production or whatever position you're in. Be respectful, 100%. But you don't have to be everyone's best friend. Okay? And if you are everyone's friend, I'm going to kick it to Aristotle. It's like, if you're a friend to everyone, you're a friend to none. And I truly believe in that. It is impossible with how unique human beings are, how individually special we all are. Like, we are snowflakes, guys. We are so different from person to person. How is it possible that you're friends with every single person unless you're being a person that you're not, or you're faking it to each person, or you're adjusting to each person? Now, you can make sure you're respectful of people, yes. And I know there are some people that you will encounter on set that you're like, I do not respect this person. But you at least have to be civil, and you have to find it in you to get along enough to do the job, right? So there is that. But then also, listen, this is not talking about like people who are abusive and rude and just, that's a whole other ballgame of a section that we should talk about, but we're not going to talk about that because we'll be here all year. So I understand that it can be hard, but if you're friends with everybody, like, something's wrong. Now, I don't like using the word networking. I say networking is like this dirty word almost, because for me, networking is like shallow. It's on the surface. You're not going deeper. And where you get your job opportunities is when you go deeper with people, when you are making a real connection, when you are building that relationship. You're not just simply being like, oh, I'm going to do this for you, you do this for me. Therefore, if I do this, you're going to get me a job. Or it's very rarely will you have that happen. Okay, you have to connect on some level with people. And people find networking exhausting. Why? Because it never ends. You will try to break in and and build your network to break in. That's one level of it. The other level of it is staying there, making sure you stay in your career, making sure that you like move up the ladder, whatever your goal is. You're going to make connections as you go along. And you're like, how do I maintain the relationship? You know, making sure you are getting in contact with people. Are you writing a couple emails a day? Are you contacting, 2-3 people a week, or whatever the thing is to make sure you stay in contact with people? That is something that is hard for a lot of people to maintain. Like, I got to email 2 people a day. Oh my God. Or whatever goal you set for the week. I think 2 people a day is a lot. That is a lot for me. I mean, if it's like 2 people a month, like if I'm working currently, it's really hard for me to write like 2 networking emails. But when I'm not working, am I writing those emails and am I writing those texts to people? Absolutely. So the networking game never stops, but when you build real connections and real relationships with people where you are around the people that you are friends with already, networking is a lot easier because you're like, oh, my friend and I are going to be on this project together. Oh, and then like next month I'm on another thing that my other friend is running or something. It's not as hard when you build actual connections and relationships with people because you're friends with them. Okay. And another thing that when it comes to networking, like it's not just the going to a random event and meeting new people. Listen, I want to meet new people all the time. I do. You have to find the thing that connects you with a person. Do you both like rowing? Are you both like romance novel enthusiasts? You know what I mean? Like, how are you going to remember this person? How are they going to remember you? Being rememberable. And the only way you can make someone remember you is if you connect and you have empathy with each other and you have compassion for other human beings. Like, an AD I work with, he watches every new movie. Every new movie that comes out, he is watching that movie. So I know that if I watch a new movie and I know that he saw it, like we are going to have a conversation about that movie. And that's some way that we connect because I know he's going to have a really good review of the new movie that just came out. That's some way that we connect. And that's how I remember him, And I think that once you get out of the realm of what can people do for me when it comes to networking, and you go from a place of like, how can I connect other people? How can I be of service to people? The paying it forward thing, you forget that you're actually making connections because you are connecting other people. And then they end up remembering like, oh yeah, Amber, connected me and this person and we did this thing together. And you're like, oh, they come back to me for something. And it's not that pay for play or like, you do something for me, I do something for you. Like, I honestly go through this and think like, how can I help my Beyond Film School alumni? How can I help that person who just wrote me an email asking for my help about this? Like, how can I service them? How can I help them? When you start to turn it around and be like, how can I help other people network? Then in turn, you're automatically like networking and you're helping people. And it's like you're connecting on a different level than just being like, what can this person do for me? How can I get a job from this person? It's like you have to change the perspective of networking. And my book's going to talk all about that. I can't wait. Like writing a book is very challenging. I was never expecting how hard it actually is. And when I get to the finish line, I get to call myself an author. It's going to be dope. And everyone's gonna be like, hey, I'm going to buy your book. And this book was amazing. I don't know what kind of goal I have for this book, but like, I'm very excited to like write this all out because I feel like it doesn't get said enough. People see it as like this necessary evil to make their career go. It is a challenge, but once you turn it around, it doesn't become a challenge anymore. It just is like this, you're not thinking about it because you're just being a human being and you're getting along with other human beings and it's like, oh, it's working, So networking, the power structure, the hours, the schedule, these are all things that make film life so hard. And I want people to realize these are the challenges that you're going to face. And it is hard. And that's why people give it a few years. Some people give it like 5 years and then that's it. They're like, all right, this isn't for me. And it's like, if it's not for you, as long as you know it's not for you, you have made that life choice, you have not failed. And I think that a lot of people like, I have the goal of being a film director, and then they realize they directed one short film, and they're like, wow, that sucked. I don't really like being a director. And then they feel guilty that they've changed their goal. But you can change your goals all the time. If you don't like film, it's okay. You can leave. It's all right. You can find something that works for you. And I feel like some people, once they set the goal, they feel like no matter what, they have to achieve it. And not realizing how hard it is. They're like, for me, it's like, I know it's hard, and I feel like there's a pride that comes with how hard it is, and you're like, I did it. I finally did it. So therefore I feel like I have to stay. But also I do think about, like, if I do leave film, what would I do afterwards? What would I care to do? You know, what would my life be like if I stopped working in film? And that, I mean, when you get to a certain age, you're like, you know what, if you do want to have kids, or a dog for that matter, like, what would I prefer to do? There's nothing wrong with changing your goals. And I just want everyone to know that, like, yes, film is hard, and you can do it. You can do it. It's very doable. You just have to take care of your body, take care of your mind, and just stay kind, honestly. I think that's the basis for surviving and thriving in this industry, is like treating everyone with kindness. Having patience and empathy and compassion is what's going to get you through these days. Not yelling at people, not being rude, not being entitled, or like, no one's paying attention to me. Get your ego in check. Don't take anything personally. And like, you're going to be a lot happier on set. So while these challenges are in place, it is completely possible to be very happy working in film and figuring out what works for you and what department, and, you know, what you really want to do with your life. So it's not impossible. It is hard, but it's also like very rewarding, because like, man, I wouldn't be able to pay off my credit debt. I wouldn't be able to live the life that I live if it wasn't for this hard life, you know? So I just want everyone to know, like, while there are challenges, it's completely possible to be very, very happy while working in film, and trying to have that work-life balance.